Hello and welcome. My name is Werner George Patels. I've been a translator for almost 40 years. I translate from German, French, and Spanish to English, as well as from English, French, and Spanish to German. I grew up with English and German, so this is why I have two active native languages or dominant languages, which allows me to translate into two different languages. Most translators only translate into one language because most people, when they grow up, they speak only one language at first. Anyway, as I said, I've been doing this for almost 40 years now, and more or less successfully. I'm considered, and I don't mind blowing my own horn in this respect. I'm known as one of the best translators in my language combinations or language pairs. I'm not saying that I'm the absolute best French to English translator, for example. There are many other translators, colleagues of mine, who produce excellent work, just the way I do. But I'm definitely one of the best in the world when it comes to my languages. Um, but I have decided to take a new approach now. I want to help out other translators, qualified, professional, competent translators, to get the right jobs, the right projects. So far, I've always been working as a freelancer, self employed for myself, but now I'm willing to include others. I want to take on jobs and projects in languages that I do not know, that I do not work in myself. Let's say, for example, Italian or Portuguese or whatever, or even Mandarin Chinese. And I want to recruit translators for these language combinations to work with me. So if I get a request from a client and they want me to do a translation from, let's say, English to French. Now, I do not translate into French because it's not one of my uh, dominant or native languages. So I leave that to those who have French as a first language. So if the client contacts me and requests a translation from English to French, right now I would have to turn that down because I do not translate into French. But I would like to recruit translators and create a network um, of qualified and competent translators. And then I can actually assign that project to one of the translators in my database, a translator who has been tested and vetted and verified in terms of their skills and track record, in the industry. And to do that, I have started this Indiegogo campaign, donation campaign, the funding campaign to get things rolling because to build an agency like this requires, of course, some capital, especially because I want to help out those translators. Because you see, the problem is that when you work for a translation agency, and that's what most of us do, I mean, we work sometimes for direct clients or for corporations, but we most of the time we work for translation agencies. So we receive our work from translation agencies, and I do, for example, and they charge their client an X amount of dollars for the project. And then, of course, me, the translator who does the actual work, I get a share of that. And depending on the translation agency you work with, you as the translator usually collect 50% of what they charge, of what the agency charges their own end client. And some agencies even pay as much as 70 or 75%. Now, I would like to get that higher up to something more like 90%. I want the translator who does the actual work to receive at least 90% of the amount the client pays for the project. I, as the facilitator, um, the one who shifts or assigns the project from my client to one of my translators. So that, I want to be 90%. I want the translator to receive 90%. So let's say, for example, it's just a small translation project. It pays $100, right? So I get from my client $100. But the translator who actually does the work for me, from English to French in my example, that translator would receive $90, and I would simply keep $10, right, uh, as the facilitator and as the person ensuring quality and everything with respect to the finished end product, the finished translation. And also, one problem that a lot of translators have who work with translation agencies is that they do not always get paid on time. Now, basically, the industry standard is that when you work for a translation agency and you deliver your translation and your invoice, the industry standard is that you get paid within 30 days of that at the latest. Some agencies say, well, we're going to pay you within 45 days. Others, mostly even in Europe, for example, will say, we will pay you 60 days after receiving your invoice. Now, for some freelancers, that's not always easy because as freelancers, we have bills to pay as well. And that means that we have to uh, be very careful sometimes because we don't know exactly when to expect the money from the translation agency that we worked for, right? We may get our money within 30 days, within 45 days, within 60 days. And sometimes we don't even get it unless we actually contact them and remind them, oh, hello, you're still owing me money from way back when. When can I expect that money to be transferred to my bank account? And that is a problem. And especially nowadays, I find, you see, in 2024 now, the translation industry has gone through a tremendous upheaval because of machine translation, automated translation, and because of artificial intelligence. More and more companies that require translation services are now taking their documents, contracts, even advertising copy and other materials, and they put them right through artificial intelligence or machine translation. Um, and then they come to translation agencies or to individual translators like myself, and they ask us to edit and proofread the translation that was produced by a machine or software or artificial intelligence. We call that machine translation post editing, or MTPE. So basically, what we do is, as a service, we take a translation that was produced by a software, and let's use that as the general term here because machine translation, artificial intelligence, that all basically boils down to software doing the job of a human translator. And we all know, everyone has seen the results that come out of Google Translate and similar programs. It helps you to get the gist of something. So you find an article online, for example, in a foreign language that you absolutely don't know. You don't understand the first thing about that language. But a machine translation like Google Translate or DeepL can give you the gist of it. And then you'll be able to understand what that is all about and what the text actually says. It will often make you laugh, probably, because some of the phrasing you find in such a computer generated translation can be quite funny um, and incorrect as well. There will be mistranslations and things like that, and misinterpretations because a machine, a software, doesn't have the life experience of an actual human translator, right? And that's the problem. And so now companies and more companies have switched to using software to generate an automatic translation and then hire a translator or a translation agency for machine translation post editing, or MTPE, to give the finished translation a human touch, right? and to repair the problems and issues created by the software when it executed the translation. Um, for the company, it is cheaper because the machine translation doesn't cost them anything. They just run it through Google Translate or a similar program, free of charge. And then instead of paying a full translation rate, they basically pay us an editing or proofreading rate, which is usually, depending on the scope of the project, can be anything from like 50% of a regular translation rate to maybe 60, maybe sometimes pushing it, to 70% of a regular translation rate. So if you're a translator who usually charges, let's say, 12 cents per word for a full translation from scratch, you can expect to charge, let's say, 6 or 7 cents for a post-editing job to fix a machine translation and make it more human, right? So in other words, there's still work to be had for translators and anyone else in the translation industry, but the income is, of course, now less. Because instead of, let's say, using the previous example, instead of earning 12 cents per word, now you're just earning 6 or 7 cents per word. But of course, an editing or proofreading job can be finished faster than a full translation from scratch. So it also leaves you more time to take on even more of such projects. So in the end, you might actually end up doing 5 jobs in a day at 6 or 7 cents a word, instead of just doing one single full translation from scratch for 12 cents a word. So you still end up with more money at the end of the day, having done 5 of such post-editing jobs. But of course, as I said, my plan is to share uh, uh, with my translators on a more equitable basis. So in other words, the person who does the actual work, so either a full translation or a post-editing job, I want them to earn at least 90% of the fee that my client has agreed to pay me for the full project, for the full job, right? And I also want to make sure that my translators are paid in a timely fashion. I don't even want them to wait for 30 days because for a lot of freelancers, it can be very difficult in terms of meeting their own responsibilities and obligations in terms of paying rent, electricity, or whatever else it might be. So I actually want to pay my translators within a week or 2 weeks at the latest. And that requires, of course, also um, some resources, right, that I need to have ready because uh, there's no denying the fact that I myself will not be paid by my own client for at least 30 days, perhaps even for 45 or 60 days. But I don't want my translators to wait that long, right? Because basically, and there are even some agencies, translation agencies, that say, well, we're not going to pay our translators until we have received the money from our own end client. So let's say if the agency is not paid for 60 days, then the agency says, well, we're not paying the translator who did the work either. That translator will have to wait until we get paid, which of course is a gross violation of contract law, because as a translator, your contract is with the translation agency, and whether or not they get paid by their end client has no bearing on your contract between you and the translation agency. If the agency says that you get paid within 30 days, then the agency must still pay you within 30 days, even if they don't get paid by their client for another 60 days, right? But this is the game that is being played in the industry. But I don't want my translators to suffer. So I want them to get paid as quickly as possible for a job well done. So I want to be able to pay them within a week or 2 weeks, right? So I'm also raising funds for my Indiegogo campaign to start this agency approach now, so that I also have funds ready to pay my translators so that they don't have to wait. So this is all part of my plan. And also, um, I hope to be able to um, educate potential clients of translation services that sometimes perhaps it might be best and even still more cost efficient to hire a professional translator, a human professional translator, to translate a crucial text or document from scratch instead of running it through uh, software and then hire an agency or a translator to do post editing on it, right? Because fixing something that's already broken is always a bit risky, because even the best proofreader or the best editor can overlook something, right? And you still end up with a less than perfect finished translation at the end. But when you have an important document for your company, for example, let's say a contract, hand it to a human professional translator right from the start, because that human translator knows how to do a proper translation. And that translator will translate the contract for you perfectly. And of course, it will still be proofread and edited, but a human translation or a translation produced by an actual human is always better than one produced by a machine or software. And so even if the translator makes a little mistake here or there, the proofreader and editor will catch that and rectify it. They will fix that. And that takes very little effort. And that is usually included in the overall price, in the overall fee charged for that particular translation service anyway. So I hope to find and recruit translators of a professional caliber who can work with me in language pairs that I do not provide, um, as well as copywriters and content writers, because I also want to target projects that involve copywriting and content writing, such as for social media or online content and similar things. And I want to provide really top quality, right? So for the languages that I cover myself, I will do the jobs myself. And for all the other languages, I will have eventually my um, group of translators, of trusted and verified translators and copywriters and content writers that can do the job. And that way, I want to sell the idea of top quality provided by human professionals and human experts in translation, language services, content writing, copywriting, right? And this way, perhaps also educate and hopefully educate more and more potential clients and corporations out there that taking the shortcut using software or artificial intelligence may not be as cost effective and cost efficient as they think it is, right? Start with a human professional, a human expert right from the start, and the end result will be that much better for you, guaranteed. And so this is my plan. And as I said, this is my Indiegogo campaign. I want to raise funds, so I've set it to $50,000. Because, as I said, it takes some time and resources, first of all, to recruit um, competent translators and writers um, to be added to my database. And then also, of course, to have the funds ready to pay them in a timely fashion within usually a week or 2 weeks, um, even if I have to wait longer from my own clients to get paid. So this is the plan, and I hope you can agree, and hopefully you will contribute to my campaign on Indiegogo. Thank you very much. I'm Werner George Patels. Thank you very much for listening and watching.